Okay, calm down.
So tell us why you resigned from your position, but also tell us, please, what your position consisted of.
Surely. So I worked in the State Department in something called the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, which is the part of the US government that is responsible, amongst other things, for arms sales and security assistance, weapons transfers essentially to partners around the world. That is a global portfolio. The US is by far the world's leading exporter of arms, to the tune of about 41% of the global market, and growing, I should add. And so in that capacity, I had, as have many others who work in the State Department and work very hard in good faith, raised concerns about human rights on a number of issues in a number of countries over the course of my work there, which lasted over a decade. I always tried to raise these issues in a constructive fashion and, felt that I was able to mitigate some of the worst outcomes that were possible of some of our arms transfers, not only in the context of Israel, but of course the US has relations with other countries with dubious human rights record and provides arms to them. But I'd also, certainly kept a close eye on, some of these Israel issues, having worked in the West Bank for the US and UK governments in 2008 to 2009 and witnessed on the ground with my own eyes the impacts of the occupation, the growth of settlements, the daily humiliations that Palestinians are subject to in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, the securitization of the region, and this sort of continuous overwatch and presence that Israel conducts that makes a lot of civilian life in the West Bank very, very difficult and certainly shuts down the economy there. So this was certainly something I was attuned to and had been raising concerns about for a while. So after October 7th, when it became immediately very clear, and I say immediately because within 24 hours, not only had Israel's bombardment begun in earnest, but of course, within 24 hours, there were also these now infamous statements from Israeli Minister of Defense Gallant and from the Israeli President Herzog that, there are no innocent civilians and the whole nation is to blame and so forth. So it was very clear very quickly to me that what we were looking at was going to be of a significant scope and scale beyond anything we had seen before, because of course we have seen repeated clashes between Israel and Hamas in which thousands of Palestinians have been killed over the last 20 years, 15 years. It was also very clear very quickly to me that the US government was not going to lift a finger to try and pull this back, to try and walk Israel back from the brink, to try and impose any sort of restraints that frankly were not only in the interest of Palestinian humanity, but probably were also in the interests of Israel's own security. If you look at its positioning in the region now, the damage it has done to its own prospects for peace and security, I would argue that we failed not only Israel, not only rather the Palestinians and ourselves, but we failed Israel as well in that moment. So first of all, I resigned when it became clear that this was the path we were on. And then second, when it became clear that there was, absolutely no space for any discussion or debate. And that's what has really set this apart for me, and I think for many of us across America, is that, on any foreign policy issue in the State Department, there's always discussion, there's always debate, there's always consideration of what are the other options, is this the best one, are there things we can do to mitigate any harm we may cause. In this instance, the directions were coming from the top of the State Department, from the White House. Let's move forward as quickly as we can with everything Israel wants. And we see the results today. And so faced with the scope and scale of the destruction and also with the inability to move the needle at all, I think that this is an important discussion for the American people to be having. This is our tax dollars that are paying for these weapons, paying for this devastation. That discussion couldn't be had within the government. So I felt that bringing outside the government, bringing it to the American public was the right thing to do. And to do that, I had to resign.
Was there a particular moment or event that happened that made you say, this is it, I can't do this anymore?
It was the accumulation of facts over the course of those first 10 days of the conflict. And, I wrote my resignation statement, but I wrote it over the course of several nights, sitting there, watching what was happening, drafting, coming back the next day, redrafting, and hoping as well that there was going to be something that we would do to change the course here. President Biden went out in those very first 10 days to Israel and met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I was hopeful that an important and effective part of his message would be a change of course, a change of tactics, a change of strategy. Instead, he offered Prime Minister Netanyahu, as he continues to, a full embrace, and that is an embrace, I fear, that has pulled America down with it, rather than uplifting the other side. So, there was not one single event. It was just an accumulation and the clear indication from everywhere around me in government that there was no change that was able to be considered.
So you also were part of a very inspiring joint statement that was called Joint Statement of U.S. Government Officials Who Have Resigned Over U.S. Policy Towards Gaza, Palestine, and Israel, and it was titled Service in Dissent. Can you talk about that and what happened with that?
Yeah, sure. So this was a joint statement. There are at this point 12 of us who have publicly resigned from the Biden administration over this administration's policies towards Israel-Palestine. And that is, as people have reached out to me, historians actually, and said that they've never seen a group like that. And I think that tells you a lot about, where this administration is going wrong, because this group of resignees represents not just the State Department. There are several of us from state, but there are also uniformed military officials who have resigned, both officers and NCO. There are folks from there's someone from the White House. There are people from the Interior Department, the Department of Education. So it's really across government. And just to be clear, there are 12 of us who have resigned publicly, but there are dozens more at least who have left their jobs without issuing a public statement, but have just said, I do not want to be complicit in this. This is not why I was in government. In any event, the 12 of us, have been in touch since each of us resigned. And, it's really become something of a family. And we've been talking about, we each have our own platform. What can we do with our shared platform to speak really to three audiences? The first audience is the Biden administration and its leadership to try and push them in the right direction. The second is the American public. And in our statement, we explain the different pieces of the puzzle that each of us saw from where we were sitting in government at the time we left. That, when you put together, I think paints a cohesive picture of where the Biden administration has been going wrong. And finally, the statement was directed to, the many thousands of colleagues still in government, and particularly in the national security branches of government, who are trying to push back, who are struggling with what the government is doing, and are trying to nudge this administration towards a better set of policies, a more humane approach. And so we wanted to reach out to those folks in particular to give them our support and our encouragement, and to let them know that we are with them 100%.